Welcome. I am calling the Eastham Water Management Committee meeting to order. I'm Charles Harris, and the time is 2 p.m. on the 16th of September. And as I said before, Adele Blanc and Janet Sisterson are traveling, so they won't be here today. We have what I consider a large number of things to touch on. Perhaps the most important thing we could go to first, at least in my mind, is the topic of fertilizer regulation. And it's important to note that tomorrow at 2:30, the Board of Selectmen here in town are hosting a joint meeting of the CONSCOM and the Water Management Committee.
Excuse me. Conservation isn't part of that joint posting.
Oh, okay.
It's Water Management, Board of Selectmen, Board of Health.
Board of Health. All right, good. So
They weren't invited, or they didn't want to come?
It's not that they weren't invited. They certainly are encouraged to participate. They hadn't really been engaged in the discussion earlier, so considering that we needed to get this out and addressed and have the speaker come, I just didn't think they would be a quorum of them, so they weren't included in the joint posting.
okay.
Certainly, if individual members, I encourage anyone to attend. I actually reached out to Shana today and have not talked with her, but hope to talk to her in advance of tomorrow's meeting. It eventually becomes a very important issue for them to deal with as a regulatory agency anyway, but in terms of the formative discussion, they're just not included. They weren't included in the joint posting.
Sure.
Charles, I see neither on the agenda or on this, on the supplemental, there's no time, just the date.
It's 2:30 tomorrow. That would otherwise be the workshop of the Board of Selectmen, so they're doing it then.
Okay, thank you.
And I could say a little bit more. John Eidman, who is the regulatory officer for the Cape Cod Commission, he will come and he will speak to us about the details of what's there. I'm just reminding myself, since Adele is not here, we need an alternative person to take notes. We have a volunteer.
Not me, I can't hear half of what's being said, and I don't approve of the other half, so.
Oh, okay, well,
Okay, I'll volunteer.
all right.
Roger.
Roger's volunteering.
I'll come, but it'll be at 3. I have an appointment at 2 in Wellfleet, so it'll be 3 if I can get there.
Well, a different thing. Roger's going to do minutes
Oh, now? That's what you were asking
Right.
for. I
Yeah.
thought you were asking for notes tomorrow.
for tomorrow. Sorry, didn't
Oh,
mean.
it wasn't clear to me, sorry.
Yeah, no notes for now. And I don't mean to skip over you, Jane. If you're on a tight time schedule or you have initial remarks that would help us.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, if I could just sort of summarize my activities of
Sure.
the month, maybe that can frame some of the discussion, related to tomorrow's meeting too. I actually have a conference call this afternoon with a student who I'll be the field supervisor for from Boston University. You will recall that we have a partnership with Boston University, their toxicology department, and now we have a graduate student that's going to do a practicum in conjunction with their advisors at the university, but doing community work here related to water quality, and in particular looking at emerging contaminants of concern, namely 1,4-dioxane. So that will involve us coming to a consensus on goals and objectives, and so she'll be supervised both academically from her faculty and also in our community under my supervision. So we really look forward to that partnership, and that conference call is this afternoon, so I'll be leaving early. But just want to give you some updates. We've been really busy on water quality issues over the month. And just want to thank everybody from the Water Management Committee who had a role in being out there for Windmill Weekend. We worked at the same location, Board of Health, Water Management, of course, we have shared interests. We were able to, I think, meet and greet a lot of people that had questions about public health, whether, on the issue of blood pressure. We did blood pressure clinic, we did some education around Lyme and tick disease and sun safety, but we also extended this into water, pond project, et cetera. So, working together, the partnership between Water Management and Board of Health is really important in our overlapping interests. So I think that was a great success, and Charles, I know you spent personally a lot of time there, and really, it was a big commitment on your part, and I applaud you for that. It was a good job. Likewise, we had the day before, and hopefully that carried over a little bit, we were able to pull together our first update, if you will, of the status of the ponds. We called it Pond Education Day, and I hope that this is an annual event. We're able to bring in more speakers and keep you in tune with what's happening in terms of projects and monitoring updates. But I thought it was well attended. I think it was an opportunity for the town, my department in particular, to reach out and say thank you to the volunteers who are such a critical part of gathering data and bringing water samples in that are a long-standing part of the information that we know about our ponds is due to this volunteer effort. So again, it was just an opportunity for us to sort of pull together just a thank you to those individuals. And if there are many more. I'm sure I've forgotten some people, and I apologize for that, but with that said, we did hand out awards, and that was followed by an update by Nate Weeks and Liz Moran, our pond consultants. If anyone missed that presentation, it is video on demand available. So if you go to the town website, you can look under video on demand, and then it's under the tab Other Meetings. And, so it's available for viewing so people can see the science, the real data collection and information about those two ponds. So, and also that was followed up by a hands-on education session by an ecologist from the Division of Conservation and Recreation, Jim Straub, who I thought was a very dynamic person. He was really engaging. Unfortunately, we were unable to video his portion of the workshop. So I'm hoping to bring him back. I don't know, Roger, I know you were there.
It was fun, actually.
He was
Yeah,
good. He was very good. It's a very important topic. We spend a lot of time talking about nutrients and the impact, but invasive species is critically important as well. And I think I spend far less time thinking about it than I should. So it's an opportunity really for him as a trained ecologist to train other people to be the eyes of the community that can report early on problems that they see brewing in their ponds. You all are in the community, and it's your treasure. You know what's out there on a day-to-day basis, and if you see something bloom that's not there normally, and it's at all of a concern to you, he offered an opportunity with the event of our ability to take pictures and email them for us to be able to have a link to his expertise. If you see something, take a picture of it. I will forward it on to him for analysis and for at least a preliminary evaluation of what that plant may be. We have a lot of plants that are not invasive. They're naturally part of our ecosystem, but those others that are real harmful are really important to identify early, and we have several ponds on Cape Cod that are really impaired because of invasives. And so I thought it was, he in particular brought something new to the table for me in terms of when I saw his presentation in Chatham. So again, I will reach out to him and thank him for his participation. I thought he did a great job. So we also want to remind you in the Health Department, Household Hazardous Waste Day collection is coming up this Saturday, September 20th. We partner with Orleans, so all Eastham residents can bring household hazardous waste to that collection from 9 to 12. We have information on our website. If you have questions, you can feel free to call our health department. But just be reminded, if you've been saving things for disposal, this is the time, and it's this Saturday. So please participate if you have anything to dispose of. And also, as Charles pointed out, we are having our joint presentation from the Cape Cod Commission. Patty Daly was not able to attend, but John Eidelman, regulatory officer there, will be doing a PowerPoint presentation. What I've asked him to do is frame the conversation about what the DCPC, the District of Critical Planning Concern, Cape Cod Commission Model Fertilizer Regulation is all about, what tools it will bring to us. So clearly, as I see it, if in fact we choose to adopt that tool, it needs to take 1 or 2 courses to be adopted by the town. It either has to be adopted at a special town meeting as a bylaw, or it has to be adopted as a Board of Health regulation. The window of opportunity for us to embrace this tool is December 31st. After that time, unless there's an extension, and there has been one in the past, so I guess it's a possibility, that we will no longer as a town have local ability to do this. But we will fall into the regulatory authority of the state, which has promulgated a regulation, has proposed a draft regulation, but it has not been promulgated yet. I'm not sure why. I've looked as of yesterday on their website. It's still not posted. So I don't know if it's still out for public comment or what the situation is. But the bottom line is that unless we choose to go this road of the Cape Cod Commission DCPC by December 31st, then that tool is off the table. So this will be an opportunity to weigh the pros and cons of going in that direction or just defaulting to the state. Of course, the state regulation, as I said, is not promulgated. The way I'm looking at this is I am a little concerned about the enforcement section, and if this falls to Board of Health, which seems like it would be the only avenue, because clearly we'd have to have a special town meeting and pay all that money to get this up and voted upon by the entire population. So it seems unlikely that that's a realistic approach. That enforcement might be difficult, but I've had a very long discussion with Bill Clark at the Extension Service, and they would be providing the educational arm of this program, the certification, and education on best management practices. That I guess we're both looking at it as additional education. I think there is a commitment by this town to look at anything proactive that we can, and pollution prevention in all cases is the least costly way to protect your resources. So to that end, I guess I've had a change of heart in a way about the Cape Cod Commission tool. And so, with that said, we'll hear what the pros and cons are tomorrow. Certainly, any education that we could pass along to people who become certified users, and I certainly would be, supportive of the Extension Services, educational outreaches. They've always done a great job in the past with every outreach effort they've done for in this area. So I hope that kind of frames the conversation that we are, if we're going to use the Cape Cod Commission model, It has to be adopted by December 31st. And able to do that as a Board of Health regulation, it has to be advertised properly and allow for public hearings. So, the Board of Health actually already has a workshop scheduled for just before their official meeting this month. So if that were the direction the town, you know, as three groups coming together, if that's the consensus or the majority opinion that that's the way to go, the Board of Health will be in a position to take that up and craft any kind of revisions to the model language that they might not feel comfortable with or feel that they could improve. Can't vary too far from the format of the commission because they have to approve it before it's accepted, because it has to meet some of the criteria that they've set in the regulatory language. So I hope that's not too much information. I hope it's a little background. I did send to you today a link that has all of the resources on it, which was very helpful to me because I've been fishing around on different sites. That UMass site had everything. It had the Cape Cod Commission bylaw, it had the different towns that have adopted their own fertilizer regulation, it had everything there. So that was a big resource. So I don't know if you have any questions about that, or
That was in your email, was it?
it was in the email today, yeah. Bill Clark, I didn't know it existed until today. but-
So these regulations that will be presented to the Board of Selectmen,
Tomorrow, what's gonna happen is the Cape Cod Commission they created a model for us to follow. To make it simple, rather than every town writing their own bylaw,
yeah.
they have a model, so you can just literally fill in the blank. They put out two models, a bylaw model and then a regulatory Board of Health model. It's the same thing with references to different section of Mass General Law. And there was a little bit of contention with people in the public health world about what the intent of it was. So they actually proposed two different scenarios for adoption. You could choose scenario A to adopt it or scenario B. The bottom line is that if the Board of Health puts itself in this role, we are the lead enforcement authority. If it was a bylaw, it's sort of subject to whoever the bylaw might name is the regulatory enforcement agent. Could be Cape Cod Conservation Commission, could be, Board of Health, could be, I don't know, I guess there's other people. But, so this is a tool, but the timeline for doing this local initiative expires. The state regulation is written, but it's not yet accepted because I printed it out and it doesn't have an effective date. It's similar, and honestly, the state regulation, its assets it includes phosphorus in it. So there's pros and cons of each. I think I would look at it this way. If we adopt it, and when the state regulation comes out, it would be in our best interest to solely abide by the state regulation. We can always retract the local Board of Health regulation. There's nothing lost. We can say, we don't want to, we're going to eliminate it. We can absolve regulations.
Okay.
We can't go back in time, though, if, in fact, there's no extension. So what's to be lost? That's the way I'm looking at it at this point in time. I really want to see the Cooperative Extension Service develop an education program. They haven't done so yet because they said, well, the answer was, no town has adopted the Cape Cod Commission tool. So we only need to develop a certification program if a town adopts it, and then that kicks in the certification program. So if no town yet has adopted it, so might that program not come into existence? I think there's something to be gained from an education program like that. I talked to Bill Clark about how do we implement it, because of course, people are gonna say it's a burden, I can't go down there, I can't go get a permit. He's talking about doing it one or two, in two different ways, online with a test at the end, and then, or in person, for people that don't like computers. Really, what it is though, you're highly educated in the areas of conservation, it's really just instituting best management practices that are part of the UMass Extension best managements for soil and nutrient management anyway. It's really just applying some science, but mostly common sense, to a practice. And I think more education is always better than not. No matter where I go and what I do, if I go to an education training session, I don't care what it's on. I usually walk away saying, oh, I learned something. Oh, I didn't know that. So I think this is an opportunity for improvement in terms of education. And will it affect the outcome? Maybe. You know, I like to be optimistic. I like to think that education's the way to go. So,
Could I ask you, in terms of us around the table here, what we're really interested in is how these regulations affect the use of fertilizer in the buffer zone?
well, again, Conservation Commission has control in areas where the rest of the regulatory agencies do not. So we still need to, not we, but if it's desired by the community, work with the Conservation Commission to craft even, you know, regulations that you think are reasonable and doable and appropriate. So, the way that this works, there is a little bit of difference between what the DCPC tool says and what the state regulatory tool says. The state regulatory tool says 100 feet. No, excuse me, 10 feet for surface water and 20 feet. It depends on the type of spreader you're using. So it's clearly written that there's a certain distance that's appropriate in the state regulation that is a little more lenient, let us say, than the DCPC tool. But the DCPC tool holds that more rigid line where people are non-certified. So there would be, again, encouragement for people to go to get educated or take an online test or view some online education material, because then it allows them a little more liberal application if they're more knowledgeable in the area of fertilizer application. So the bottom line is a lot of this is going to happen through education, not through enforcement. There's not going to be a conservation agent that's going to be able to witness, stop, evaluate, measure how much fertilizer you applied, when you applied it, and with what spreader you applied it. However, we can educate people to do the right thing. And I think that's the important message.
Yeah, Jane, I was hoping that we could start the discussion around the table as to what our possibilities are. And what I've done is I've handed out PowerPoint paper slides of what would be John, I guess it's Eidman, a presentation tomorrow. It's 10 slides, it's pretty detailed, and I was hoping that as many as possible members of the committee would be able to go and listen to it. And I was thinking maybe we could just kind of highlight things to listen for. in that presentation. The, let's see, I have read through it, and I think I can point out some key things, but the, I have a question for Jane. Okay, is there a way that we can do this without a special town meeting before December?
Not as a bylaw. As a bylaw, that's the avenue for a vote.
All right, but apparently we could do it as a regulation.
Board of Health regulation.
All right,
The Board of Health does it
the Board of Health does it.
and holds a public hearing.
Okay,
And we have to advertise 14 days before the meeting and 2 consecutive weeks in a row. But as I said, which we are well aware of, and we're poised to do that if the group decides to go in that direction.
let me ask you another one here.
Today.
The, you need some paper
I'm
there?
afraid to go to the bathroom, right? Rodney Dangerfield joke.
Marcel?
That's all right, okay,
use
thank
that
you.
paper.
I can get some.
Well, let's just pause a minute for Jane to
That's not,
come back.
Charles, do you remember the DCPC had done some presentation for us at the last second annual Water Commission down there at the Four Seas about how they had protected the wetlands in Falmouth and how effective that was, one of the 20 to 40-minute presentations. Do you recall that one?
Vaguely.
Vaguely. No, it was excellent what they did, the work that they had done, that DCPC had. If they hadn't been proactive, that wetlands would have disappeared down there because state regulations and federal regulations wouldn't have protected it. So their work was fabulous, their presentation was fabulous. And from what I can see here, anything that they're working for to protect us now with fertilization will be light years ahead of what the state ever manages to do.
Yeah. Let's see, can't organize my thoughts here. Let me ask you another question now. Let's see, the Conservation Committee also has regulatory authority as a government body of the town. And is it feasible that they would be the sort of owner of the reg and be the enforcing agent?
The way that the tools that we have before us right now are bylaw, where I believe Conservation Commission could be named the regulatory enforcement agent, or the bylaw for Board of Health. That's what we have to work with. Conservation Commission can develop its own regulations and have stringent oversight within the 100-foot buffer zone. So that does not prelude them from doing so.
Good, all right, that's the key thing. So the Conservation Commission only has authority over 100 feet.
Yep.
Whereas Board of Health would have authority over the
Right, I
the
mean,
whole
it's
town.
under Mass General Law, and the rationale is that it's for environmental and public health protection. And there are huge reasons why, I mean, we could probably go on for a long time on why either one of those is very valid. But clearly, it relates to if you have excess nutrient loading, we have had in this town blue-green algae, which in some cases releases a toxin which can have public health effect. And there are other algal species that are considered harmful to public health. So if you have excessive nutrient loading, that could be the cause and effect. So that's why under Mass General Law, this would be a rational approach to take in terms of a regulation that promotes public/environmental health. Likewise, another scenario you could lay out is that we have on-site wells, and that public health is afforded by limiting nutrient loading to public drinking water or private wells, if you will, within your community. So again, those are two extremely defensible reasons that a town would adopt a regulation. And to defend and to have a regulation in place that affects the community, you have to be able to defend it. Because clearly, we just don't regulate for the sake of creating more rules. So we have to have direct public health impact, and there's clear rationale for doing it. The enforcement, as Marcel is pointing out indirectly, is difficult.
It wouldn't be for the Conservation Commission, but they're not, they don't seem inclined to do anything, so I guess we need to look elsewhere.
Yeah. Jane, what you said helped me a lot because I'm somewhat new and I don't really understand which body does which things. But see, the fact that in the health office that we do have employees that go out and inspect for performance, restaurants and things like that, means that, yes, we do have town staff that has competency to meet the public and go inspect and conduct business in that manner. That's
Well, I'd like to believe so, and I'm very supportive of my staff. I think they're excellent, and they're highly trained and highly educated, and I think they're really great in dealing with the public. We deal with the public on a lot of different regulatory areas that have their own regulatory code, which we follow in the inspection process. Really what we're talking about here, we're not going to be going out. If the decision is to go with a Board of Health regulation, we would not be going out and inspecting people's homes or their yards or evaluating what their fertilizer load is on their private property. We are not doing that. We do not have the ability, and it's not doable. But what we do have is regulatory authority under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 111, Section 31, and that authorize us to develop and utilize regulations that would promote public health and provide environmental protection. So to that end, we would support some of the parts of this model regulation, which encourage the education and certification program that I'm alluding to at the Cooperative Extension Service. That is what we will do. I guess, you're going to ask, oh, what if somebody complains about the neighbor down the street? It's a difficult thing to prove. And I mean, I think what we're going to use this is as an opportunity for education. I think what we would do if we were tasked with getting in the middle of that conversation is I would go and I would provide the homeowner with one of these brochures. Are you aware that good lawn practices can help protect the water? And here's a brochure that enumerates some of the tips that you can use yourself to do that. And some people aren't aware of what the right thing to do is. I think through the Cooperative Extension Service and their extensive education programs with agriculture and horticulture and pesticides and such, that they can develop some tools that can further that education. So maybe people don't understand about the time to apply fertilizer. That if you're applying fertilizer when the grass isn't growing, you're throwing money down the drain and into the aquifer, literally, because it's not getting taken up by the plants. So does everyone know that? I'm not sure. Is this a good opportunity to hear from horticulturists and people that have way more experience in agriculture than me? I think yes. And I think that they offer a variety of services there that maybe people are interested in. Once they get a little education, maybe they're going to want even more. So I think this brochure that the Cooperative Extension has already done is a start in the right direction, and that there's no harm in this. And I think that any further tools and education that we develop, it's a good thing. So,
So yes, let's see, I'm wondering how to proceed at this point. I guess one thing we might do, everybody's got a copy of the slides.
Yeah, and I emailed this out, I think to everyone,
All right.
correct?
And-
Did you
and-
get this?
Yeah, I didn't
Okay.
look at it.
I've
from the
been, I've
email.
been bombarding everybody I know, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I
if
can
we,
check.
if we did a kind of a slow walk through the slides, just kind of, I've already done this, and I wrote down a list of 4 or 5 points that I have come up with that I will either give as advice to the table, or you can see that there's a particular issue that perhaps needs a little more thinking. Okay, I think everybody knows that we're in this kind of window of opportunity because of what they call the DCPC. And that's the District of Critical Preservation, I believe, concern, planning concern. And it's a rule that under which the Cape Cod Commission can in fact create a system of regulation on fertilizer, and that's what they've done. They've come up with a draft for us. All right. The thing that, all right, so I guess I'm on page 3 or 4. I'm looking at all towns would hold a public hearing, adopt local regulation by the end of 2014. It would have to be consistent with what the DC has passed out. And it also refers to the UMass best management practices. I have gone to that document and looked it over, and it seems like well-crafted. In other words, you can move down through it, and you can find the points of information that you would be looking for. It's not a, it's the best it can be when you have to go research a subject. Let me say that. I think UMass folks have put good effort into doing that, and it's the technical reference that that supports really any regulation, whether it's Mass Department of Agriculture or it's something that we have here just local on the Cape. Let's see, all right, so, and then I'm on fertilizer management, DCPC purposes. Fertilizer, we are being told, is a significant contributor to the nitrogen that's getting out in the ocean and interfering with the salt grasses that grow out there that are in fact the origin of the food chain animals. And this one says 9% Cape-wide. In the meetings that I'm attending in the 208 process, basically the numbers that they're using is 10% of the nitrate comes from fertilizer, 10% comes from stormwater, and 80% comes from septic systems. And in the 208 planning process, basically the director there from the Cape Cod Commission is saying the folks on Cape Cod have got to craft a proposal for how they are going to deal with this much nitrate getting off the land into the ocean. And so, and they're going to need to have something to say, some approach for those 3 things: the septic systems, the fertilizer, and the road runoff. So, to be smart, to essentially meet others halfway in the system, we need some type of a regulation. And I guess I would also say that I think we need a regulation that is unique to Cape Cod because our soils are not like they have in the rest of the state. So that there really is a good reason for us to say, no, we'll take Cape Cod, you take the soils that have developed from the weathering of the continent of North America, not essentially the sand and silt that the glacier has pushed up here for us. So all right, so if we go to local DCPC, we need a regulation that is consistent enough with the DCPC draft for the Cape Cod Commission to say, yes, it may be a little different, but it's not different enough to destroy the usefulness or the functioning of an approach at county level as opposed to an approach at state level. All right. So guidelines for the DCPC. Basically, they're talking time, place, manner of restrictions on applications. They're using abbreviation here, TOY, that's time of year. Basically, they're saying you shouldn't be putting fertilizer down at a time when the cold weather is keeping the plants from growing anyways. They're talking about the fact that you really need some kind of a certification in there such that the professionals have respect for the professional training that they have. In other words, you don't want to make it harder on people that perhaps in fact have been exercising good judgment up to this point in holding down on how much fertilizer is going on and whatnot. So we do have, we need a way to distinguish between the homeowner and a professional who's doing it as their work. I kind of like the local effect on enforcement because, you know, when you stop and think about it, we don't have very much agriculture in the sense of growing fruit, except for cranberries. We don't have row crops on the Cape to any appreciable extent, except in home gardens. We don't have animals that eat grass.
Turnips.
Don't mess with the turnips.
Right, no, you're right. I mean, there's always an exception, and yes, turnips are a crop that will grow in the cooler months of the year where they won't grow anyplace else in the state out here on Cape Cod. So we have, that's a uniqueness that we have. But what I'm saying is that it does seem like if we have something local, it would be better than waiting for statewide because we would be at the disadvantage at the state regulatory level because those civil servants would have essentially a standard that fits all of the state, all of the different soils, Connecticut Valley, all that kind of business. Whereas if we had something where we just need to have folks in the system as civil servants backing us up, but knowing how distinct the Cape Cod soils are compared to other places on the Cape. I think that's an important thing. We do exempt agriculture. What do we got? We got I guess I don't know of I guess there's one or two orchards on the Cape. I do know of the vineyard up in Turo, but it would perhaps be one of the few places you'd actually have agriculture going on with an exception. Maybe you might have, it's possible that some of the nurseries might be growing their own stock and the growing of a woody plant to sell. That would be considered agriculture perhaps at that level, but it's not a big
Charles,
thing. Yeah.
I just want to be clear about this, that there is an exemption for home gardens, landscaping, ornamental shrubs, tree bushes, fruits, vegetables, container plants. Those are exempt as well as commercial agriculture. So that's under the exemption section.
Good.
So that's exempt. So really, all we're talking about here is turf, grass, growing grass, and turf management.
Yeah. Let's see. All right. So I'm down on snapshots of the model regulation. They're basically talking about how many pounds of nitrogen per 10,000 square feet. They also talk phosphorus. To me, it's important that the regulation covers both of those items. Right now, the state agricultural regulation does not have phosphorus in it. It just has nitrogen. All right, let's see, I'm pretty well covered the points. It's very believable to me that a town civil servant, given the task of being responsible for enforcement in this, could easily present existing brochures, information that would be adequate to inform a person as to what the desired performance is. When I think about Eastham and I think about the number of houses with very well-maintained lawns, we just don't have them in large numbers, as close to water bodies as you might see in many other towns on the Cape. So it to me is more of meeting that 208 checkbox. It's being able to say, yes, we have policy, yes, we have regulations that speak to excess fertilizer. And they are straightforward and not troublesome. In other words, I don't know. There are some regulations that that communities have to have, but they are very difficult to regulate in. So they essentially become troublesome no matter how hard you work on writing the thing. I don't see this as being troublesome in that respect. If I would encourage you to go to tomorrow's presentation.
If it's a joint meeting, are we required to?
Well, yes. I mean,
You have to have a quorum.
well, yeah. We are being asked to be there, so as many should go. Even if we don't have a quorum, it's appropriate that we go because we essentially serve, one, as witness on the discussion of the subject, and two, we have points that we might raise, insights that we might have as the conversation goes along. So, and I guess I might throw a dollar item in there. With this 208 nitrogen planning that's coming, it's inescapable that that money's going to have to be spent. I mean, it's and I see the fertilizer is a relatively inexpensive way of addressing the nitrate coming from fertilizer compared to the other ways. And of course, you know, when you step into stormwater drainage, you're talking about some kind of an improvement at the edge of the road where the liquid washing off the road gets some type of processing through some type of a man-made feature. Okay, well, that costs money. And it would be spent at town level. Maybe there would be some state assistance in that, but it's still a step up in spending money. And then when you get to the septic business, I mean, the worst of that is you would have to build a wastewater treatment plant, a centralized collection system to get enough nitrogen captured such that it doesn't go into the ocean. Or you can go down with clustered systems, maybe something in the vicinity of what we already have up here at Brackett Landing. We have a number of bedrooms all in different houses connected to one septic treatment item, but still, you know, that costs money. So I see it as a way of getting performance without spending too much money. Good cost benefit. Anybody want to debate me on that or give me any other ideas?
The only thing, you said that 10% comes from fertilizer, 10% from runoff, 80% from septics. Are there any natural sources of nitrogen? And is there a certain amount that's considered okay, like a budget?
Yes, you're right, Roger. Those three that I mentioned, they're what they call controllable nitrogen.
Okay.
It's true that we are getting rain that has some nitrogen in it, and it picked it up from all of the different smokestacks across the country that has blown it to us. Yeah, there is some there. You know, if you go down to Washington D.C. area, a very large amount of the nitrate that ends up in the Chesapeake is just coming out of the automobile exhaust from all of those cars that are being driven around the Washington, Baltimore area. We're kind of fortunate in that we don't have a lot of highways just to the west of us in that respect. At least we don't have the traffic going down the East Coast between Florida and Massachusetts or something to pump up the nitrate in there.
Charles, there's no mention of tidal nitrogen.
What sort of nitrogen, Bill?
Tidal, coming in from the tide. The Orleans Citizens Group made a big deal about that there was something like 10 times more coming in from the tide than was coming in from most other sources.
Bill, I've been in those meetings and I've listened to that presentation. It's, I would say that some people in those meetings have a high concern for what comes in on the tide, and some others don't. The way I look at it is that what I learned in ecology is that the boundaries between various ecological zones, like you have a forest here and you have a meadow here. And what the folks that know ecology say that the diversity right along the edge between the trees and the meadow is where you find the greatest amount of interaction, because at a certain time the trees provide an advantage to the folks that live in the meadow, and sometimes it works the other way. You can go into the woods for protection that you don't get out in the meadow. So I see it not so much as the nitrate in the ocean water that's coming in and out of the various bays as it is what's happening right there at the edge of the land and the water. And I essentially say, you know, I see a lot of plants that indicate pollution in the nitrate area to me right at that edge. You know, when you see what they call that sea lettuce, and you see the heavy green color of the water, it's right there at the edge. That's where you want to deal with pollution, and not so much further out. That you would essentially you'd say, well, of course it's brackish. It's some seawater and it's some fresh water.
If I could just interrupt for a second, even though this is part of the bigger discussion about the Cape Cod Commission's or actually the Massachusetts Estuaries Project's maximum daily loads that are affecting our estuaries. I think it's important to stay focused, though, on tomorrow. What we're going to be discussing it's not fixing all the pollution problems in the world. It's focusing on in Eastham, I would beg to differ that less than 10% of our nitrogen is coming from fertilizer, because I actually don't think that many people fertilize their lawns compared to other area. But that argument aside, let's just go with the flow and say 10%. Pollution prevention is the most effective way, the cheapest, most effective way to get a positive result in terms of money spent, what you see. So if we can prevent some minor amount of fertilizer pollution getting into our groundwater, then why not do this? Why not attempt to do this? It's education, its goal is going to be achieved through education. That is going to be the vehicle for that end result occurring, not regulation. It's not gonna happen through enforcement. It's gonna happen through people discussing it, people becoming more informed, and making better choices in land applications. So tomorrow's discussion is not on the authority of the Cape Cod Commission or DCPCs in general. It's focused on discussion of a tool they're bringing to us that we can choose to use, a model regulation that gives us a footprint of a path to follow. And what it's geared at is turf fertilizer only. And that's what we're talking about, and that's under discussion, not all the other sources of nitrogen and all of that. That's a much larger discussion. So just this alone is tricky enough, but, just if we could stay, on that point, I think it's gonna be a smooth meeting and a straightforward meeting, but those other aspects about how nitrogen gets into the environment and the impact to the estuaries is a completely larger discussion. And this is just solely focused at turf management, fertilizer regulation within the town, and there are many exemptions, which include commercial applicators and agricultural use. So I know some people don't like that, but those people are already licensed and trained and educated in this area, and so they are part of the exemption. So, that's all I hope to accomplish, is to get everyone on the same page about what's doable, what's enforceable, and then move forward, or not,
Sure,
I
sure.
guess.
Anybody else wanna?
I think it's doable, but certainly, would it have any effect? I mean, just driving around, you probably see 20 times more Cape Cod lawns than you see Connecticut lawns.
Mhm.
And,
Right.
So
So the minimal,
it's actually a
but
really tiny
it's,
issue
at
for
least
us, yeah.
it's an effort, Bill, though. It's an effort towards education.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I don't think we experience a great deal of degradation to our groundwater from fertilizer abuse.
Mhm.
But certainly our ponds, we've invested a lot of money in our ponds. $220,000 in Great Pond, $140,000 in Herring Pond. And in getting that CPA funding, we told the community we were gonna do a complete approach to try to keep those ponds, now that we've invested money in their restoration, in the same good state they're in right now. And one of the ways to do that is to not make the problem any worse by controllable disposal of fertilizer.
Jane,
Use
I have
of
no
fertilizer.
quarrel with what you're saying about, the regulations in general, but I have to tell you that nothing that I've heard so far does anything for the ponds.
Well, if we get some people that live around the ponds that might have not known that application of fertilizer that might run off into the pond is harmful, then we've done something. If we get just a handful of those people. It's
I don't want to
optimistic, I
question the good
understand.
faith, but I gotta tell you, these people don't have a skin in this thing. They pollute the ponds. We take tax money and clean up the ponds for them. Why should they care?
I have to say, I don't have a negative attitude like that. Roger and Charles were both at the pond meeting. I would say most of the people in attendance are actually stewards of the environment. They are the choir, they're not the, but I still think that you have enough good energy here that hopefully, by maybe creating some more educational
No,
tools.
I don't.
I mean,
I
or we
admire
just give
your
up.
optimism, yeah.
Or we just give up and we
Have
do
you
nothing.
told them that they're not supposed to use fertilizer in the buffer zone? That's the one thing you have to tell them.
So I think that there has to be a desire to continue to do the education and outreach. And I think it's our responsibility, it's my responsibility, if I'm involved in managing some of these programs, that I continue to do what I say I was gonna do. And that's
So the message is important, right?
It's the message, it's not
And is the
really.
message telling them they're not supposed to fertilize the buffer zone?
The message is telling them to protect their waters through best management practices.
Gee, that's an awfully complicated thing for saying you're not supposed to fertilize the buffer zone.
Yeah, well,
I mean, you know, just plain
Regulate
English.
them into that. I cannot tell them they can't do that. What I
You
can
can tell them
do,
they shouldn't do that.
yes, and it's in here. and
No,
that you
no, no,
shouldn't.
best management practices doesn't tell anybody anything. It's a technical buzz term. Why is it that you can't tell them you're not supposed to fertilize the buffer zone?
Because you'd have to have a regulation in place to
You
tell them that.
don't. You're advising them what's best for the
And I
ponds.
can't tell them they can't do it.
They shouldn't do it, is what I'm saying. Can you tell them that?
Aren't you guys saying
Yeah,
the
yeah.
same thing?
Yeah,
If you can tell them that, are you telling them that? You should not fertilize the buffer zone, period.
yeah, I guess we're saying should not
Yeah. But that doesn't say that.
I don't know if it's,
well, Marcel,
I can't remember, I've read.
you and I went to CONSCOM once before.
Oh, yeah, they've been told. They know.
Right, and.
It doesn't say in
And-
feet,
And
Marcel, you're right.
as Jane points out, the CONSCOM has the authority in that,
Yeah, but we have a responsibility as a committee to give people the best possible advice we can. And the advice we should give them, in plain English, is you should not fertilize the buffer zone. It's very simple. What's so complicated about that?
Marcel, I think our.
Maybe you're right.
Our brochure says that. I mean,
I've looked at everything, and it does not say that. There's not a piece of paper, that, you know, as if you're going to do education, I'm all for it. But just plainly tell them, you should not fertilize the buffer zone.
yeah, you're right, Marcel. At the moment, I cannot go to it, but I think that idea was present when we gathered up all the ideas to try and get them into the brochure. And the other thing is, I mean, the fallback is that, yes, we do have an organization like CONSCOM, and that does have authority over the
They
first
have their
100 feet.
job, we have our job. Our job is to restore, protect the ponds, the surface waters on the Cape. And so we should be telling people, regardless of what CONSCOM does, we should be giving people good advice. And one of them would be to plainly tell them, please, you should not fertilize the buffer zone. It's as simple as that.
You know, I completely agree with you, Marcel. And we do have a little money that was donated for a purpose of pond protection. And I think real clear messages are something that maybe we can work on. And maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. It's as simple as that. And we should have some tools available to just, if you're not gonna listen to what I'm saying, maybe I can hand you this brochure and you'll read it. So I think it merits further discussion, and I'll work with Bill Clark. They really put together some nice materials, and I'll come back to you. And maybe you're right, maybe it's just that simple.
Yeah. Marcel, I could be wrong, but I think over the next year, as the topic of lawn and stormwater runoff and septic gets widely discussed on the Cape through that 208 planning process.
Well, now that you bring it up, let's talk about it. As usual, I have gone over that pond plan, the thing that you're going to give the selectmen, the board of selectmen.
Not
to-
at this meeting, next
Right.
time.
And I go through the second paragraph, and there it is. The source of contamination, or the source of phosphorus contamination in the ponds is due to the septic systems. And it's wrong. It's not. It's misinformation. The retardation factor, which is the ratio of the velocity of groundwater to the velocity of a phosphate plume, is close to 100. If you have 300 feet, let's say your septic system is 300 feet from the pond, and let's say it takes a year for the water to go from the septic system to the pond, it would take 300 years, I'm sorry, 100 years, it would take 100 years for that phosphate plume to reach the pond. And unless you're willing to blame the Pilgrims for polluting our ponds, I mean, this is ridiculous. You
Yeah,
just cannot say things like that and expect people then to pay attention to other stuff.
Well, the plan says that the sources of the phosphorus include septic systems, phosphorus held
right.
in sediment in the ponds,
Right.
lawn and garden maintenance, precipitation,
Right.
road and parking, lot
Right.
runoff.
I know what it says.
Roof
I've read it.
runoff,
I
and
read
birch
it
runoff.
this morning.
But it doesn't say it's just septic systems.
It says the
all
primary
those-
source.
It says no, it doesn't.
Okay, let me check that.
The main cause.
The main cause, yeah, the main cause,
So
okay.
what do you want to say?
What I'm saying
It
is that
lists
it's
all-
wrong, it's
it lists-
misinformation.
It lists all of those.
Marcel,
And so, you know, you know, there are a lot of good stuff in that thing, and it's perfectly okay to present it to the Board of Selectmen, but don't, you know, think that it's an action plan that they should adopt, because it's got a lot of stuff in there that doesn't work.
Marcel, where I am at this moment is that I am very happy that we've had a discussion and brought out different thoughts on fertilizer, because there is good reason for the town to either act or not act between
Right.
now and December. And tomorrow's going to be,
But that septic system thing, that's what people think is the primary. I've heard all the people around the table say, well, this is what's causing it. And it's wrong. And so the fertilizer bed becomes irrelevant because they don't think it's important. In fact, when it comes to the health of the ponds, the runoff from fertilizing the buffer zone is where that pollution to the pond comes from.
it's not a good thing. I agree with you, Marcel. But at this point, I feel like there's some other topics that we've got
No,
to.
go ahead, yeah, go ahead. I
We've
just
gotta
thought I'd
go
mention
with-
it because you
Sure.
brought up septic systems.
All right, let me just kind of, we've talked about what would be to me the number one, and let's see, let me see if I can quickly review all of the 208 planning business that's going on. All right, Sandy Bain and I are appointed representatives to what's called the Orleans Water Quality Advisory Panel. All right, now, the panel is kind of a subcommittee that, on the larger 208 process, the Cape Cod Commission is providing the salary money for Mike Dominica and for, who has the engineering skills in this area, and for Stacy Smith, who is a facilitator of group discussions. All right, and it's unique in the sense that they've said, okay, in the Orleans area, there are a number of issues that are complex, that need to be discussed if we are to eventually get to a good place in the overall 208 planning process. So we met on the 10th of September, and Sandy has in fact made a statement back to the Board of Selectmen as to how the meeting before that went. And that, if you look on the back of your agendas, you'll see kind of a flow chart. And that was the document that I kind of hastily made and also delivered to the Board of Selectmen. I guess it was last Monday. And what I did is I pulled phrases out of the process document that is being used in that Water Quality Advisory Panel. And those particular phrases there with a verb that starts each one of them is what the panel is supposed to be doing. There's a similar one that is being used by the contractors that are being provided by the Cape Cod Commission to assist that particular panel in doing things. Now, there's that's the panel meeting. Okay. If you look down and on the, on the agenda right below that, we've got the draft water quality plan release and public hearing dates. Okay. The Outer Cape folks had their the release of the draft and a public hearing, I guess it was last Friday. I went to that and I listened to Paul Niedzwiecki go through and identify all of the changes that Cape Cod Commission is recommending go on in the processes that have been in place up to this point for the Cape Cod Commission and also for the state of Massachusetts. And basically he's saying is that, yes, it's true, we have engineering technical problems, but we also have word problems. We're trying to do things in a way that's no longer current and useful for the professionals that we have. And so I listened to his recommendations, and a lot of them were, well, legal changes, reg changes, is what they were. I didn't stay for the public hearing that followed that, but I can tell you that the general temper of the folks in the room, and there were about 20 people listening to Paul's presentation, and maybe about 30 that came for the public hearing that I didn't stay for. But there was not a lot of emotion. It was thoughtful, and I think that's an easy way to kind of characterize it. Now, on the 24th of September, the same type of meeting is going to go on for what they're calling the Lower Cape group. So that's Harwich and Chatham and Orleans, and we're kind of sitting in the middle. It will essentially be the same, Paul says it's the same agenda. At 2 o'clock, he'll lay out the high points of the draft that they have now created, and then at 4 o'clock, they'll be asking for public comment on it. Okay, that's two things that I've talked about on 208. The final thing is that there's another group meeting on Namsakett Marsh, and the issue there is to try and figure out the current ecological health of the marsh and whether it has been harmed by the existing Tri-Town discharges or any evidence that would be harmed by larger discharges that might come from a centralized wastewater treatment plant if in fact something like that is built. And the nature of that discussion, and there was a good 30 folks there, is that there was a USGS person there was Brian House from SMAS, there was a young woman from a consulting firm who essentially had the job of facilitating. I guess there was another woman and 2 or 3 other technical people, but basically it was about 7 technical people discussing what would be a prudent way to go forward to figure out the condition of Namsakett Marsh, whether it has a clay layer that is helpful or doesn't have a clay layer and that's hurtful, or whether the 20-some feet of peat that sits under the grass is helping or not helping, that kind of thing. I guess if you say all these things are very busy, they are. There's an incredible amount of activity going on in that area. All right, so let me step off of that subject. I want to call your attention to the fact that Superintendent of Public Works, Neil Andrus, was able to send in a project needs statement for improving the stormwater runoff that comes off of Route 6 and goes into Salt Pond. I've got a copy of that. I think I sent a copy to everybody on the committee, and it goes through, and basically it's all the reasons why this project should receive funding and should go forward. And the fact that Neil has it submitted then allows the state civil servants to essentially read it and say, okay, this has merit or it doesn't have merit. We are going to fund it, but we don't have the money now. Essentially, it goes on the list. And in Neil's email that went with it, it says, you know, it might take a couple of years, but if it wasn't, if he didn't do this, it wouldn't happen whatsoever because it just wasn't on a list that could be acted upon. So, all right. I also wanted to talk about Windmill Weekend, and I used this map that I'm kind of pointing to right now, and it was very helpful. I got a lot of people to stop and talk about water supply, and I found that their level of understanding just from the public was good. People were informed. They essentially knew about where we were in the planning process. And I pointed out to them that right now we've reached the point where we have areas where the engineers are saying that they would make a small they would recommend making a small modification that would improve the cost benefit of the project. And basically what they're saying is that, oh, let's see, up there by Old Orchard Road, where we have a cemetery across the street, on the west side of it, it would make more sense to bring the pipeline down, I guess it's Great Pond, yeah, it's Great Pond, and then join it to another pipe that would be going on Kingsbury Beach. And they were pointing out that they have no real customers on that particular stretch of the west side of the road of Route 6, so, because it's a cemetery area for the most part, and that it would in fact cause traffic disturbance if they built it there, whereas it would be less of an impact if it was over there on Great Pond. And that's essentially the same thing they're saying down here at Governor Prince Extension. They're saying if they ran it on the extension rather than on Route 6, because they have no customers, and it's just, you know, actually that's pretty much at sea level at that particular point, so it would be a little bit more complicated engineering. And the last thing we talked about, or with reference to the map, is that the Board of Selectmen are sort of looking for a policy statement that will allow them to deal with lots that sit at unusual corners, in which that puts them pretty close to the main line pipe, but not as close as the lots that are actually on the road. And the engineers are pointing out there's at least 4 of those places in town. I've heard them say that there's perhaps 10 in total, where they need some kind of a rule. And I was thinking, well, what would that rule be? And the rule might be that if we know the average distance from the pipe to a house, that we can calculate for throughout the town. If we said, well, double the distance, and if the house is within reason of that double distance, put in a tap that's there for them to be served. And of course, I mean, the homeowner would have to pay the plumber who's going to hook them up to that tap, and if the plumber has to go through or underneath a large amount of asphalt, that's more expensive than what it otherwise would be. But if nothing else, that should show you at about the level of discussion that's going on right now. And when the engineers come and bring situations to the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen take them on as things they need to discuss and decide upon, and then inform the engineers to the way to go on that.
Well, Charles, making considerations for those exceptions to the rule, you know, on the line versus near the line. And if the homeowner is going to bear the cost of connecting to the tap, and they then become a customer of the system, thereby with their fees and expenses support the system, it should be quite liberal, that policy. Would be my feeling. it's no cost to the town and can only support the operation of the system. Anybody that's willing to drive a line 100 feet or 90 feet to the main and pay for that, so you pay for that with a plumber. There's no additional cost. As you say a tap, I don't know what level that raises of cost to include a tap at the main at that point. As my understanding, as new houses are developed, that tap is an inexpensive, fairly inexpensive cost to add to the main.
Yes, my understanding, not that expensive.
$50 was what I had been told, something in that nature.
Another part of it, though, is we're putting in the backbone, so the assumption is there'll be another 2-year construction phase, and we will fill in some of the
Holes?
some of
The
the
holes.
the holes, some of the roads that don't have service, but they are essentially beside where we have a main line. So basically, everyone has been told in town that the plan allows for them to eventually have service. So, and the assumption is that we would go to priority areas in the next two years, and then the 2 years after that. So, but it could be, end up with a homeowner with perhaps a poor septic and well situation, whose road just isn't getting that priority, and yet they're so close that you can almost taste it.
I don't understand what the issue is. I would have thought the water system is like a common carrier. You have to give it to everybody regardless.
It is, but
I mean, you can't say, well, you're too far away, to help with you.
but it's on the phasing of construction.
Yeah.
It would seem like the original plan was to have 6 2-year building periods, and that through that we would build out and provide everybody in town. Well, what we voted for was the backbone, but when we get that done, and that's the spring of 2017, they were saying that they would have all this done. There would be people who would say, would you please provide us with water? We have a problem. We have iron, we have nitrate, something like that. And I don't know how that process would be. In fact, I mean, it's just sort of, what I'm saying now is basically how I understand it. There would be a collection of higher priority situations that needed to be bundled into a 2-year construction activity. But there would be some people who would be 4 years out. Some other people would be 6 years out. And if they're the folks that can wait or are still okay, then you'd say, all right, we've provided the most good for the most number of people. All right, so let's see, what else do we have for topics that we, I think it's quite important that we address the topic of an estuary protection document in the sense of the ponds document that we've made. And Janet Sisterson has asked me about that. And I do recall that when we were doing the freshwater pond document, we sort of made a decision that we would go for the freshwater pond, but there would be something coming for the estuaries. And I'm saying let's put that on the agenda for the October meeting. I think it may in fact get a boost from all this 208 planning that's going on. So it would be a way of sort of explaining to people how this all is coming about. Let's see. I can tell you that I did also go to the Eastham Part-Time Residents meeting back on the 16th of August. I found that quite helpful, talking with folks. We really have some decent people that live here in town, and I feel somewhat vindicated in volunteering my time to do things, and I guess I would perhaps pass that on to others, that yes, we do get a lot of involvement here, but there's some pretty decent folks out there that that are being benefited by our efforts, so I'm encouraged by that. Let's see, you know, I've forgotten who we had here for last meeting's minutes. One thing we could do is, Adele will be back, and we could just approve of last meeting's minutes at the October meeting, so that would take care of that. Let's see. Roger, are we at a place on the pond protection plan where we need to make some
Well, what we,
statements?
we've been through the process that we laid out in section 5. And so we're basically ready to declare victory and call it no longer a draft. And that's what I sent, was version 1.0. And so that's what we need to have the selectmen approve. It's, realistically, the document's just going to keep getting updated. Sandy sent some more comments. Marcel still has issues. So, I mean, things will continue to evolve. But at this point, it's mature enough to call it a plan. And then as we execute the plan, we adapt as we go along. We should, it's been a while since we've actually gone through it, to review the status of some of the things in the appendix. So we should do that. And so maybe we could start working on the next sub-release as an update to 1.0, but I think right now we need to freeze 1.0 as it was sent out last week and get that approved. Otherwise, we'll just never finish it.
Sure, okay.
Does that sound reasonable?
It does to me.
So we
Others?
could go through it in October and start working on the next version with the understanding that it's frozen 1.0 for approval by the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, and to some extent, it may be just carrying our declaration that this is a maturity point for the time being. We got a pretty good review from the Board of Selectmen, and nothing in the comments that came back to us overturned anything significant. I'm recalling.
Bless you.
You mean the times we've gone to the Board of Selectmen?
Well, we went to the Board of Selectmen when we asked them for permission to put it on the town website and ask for comments, okay.
Yep.
So, and nothing came back in that would, I think, change all that substantially.
No, well, we got one set of comments from one person, Peter Truncaro,
Oh,
and we addressed those at the meeting. We've gotten comments. We did get comments from the Board of Health, and we had a couple of rounds with them. So that was kind of our first, because Board of Health, they're contributors, and so we went to them first, and then we sent the letter out to the coordinating organizations, and we didn't get anything from them. And then we got permission to put it on the town website and go to the public and put the little article in the Cape Codder. And we got the one set of comments from Peter Truncaro that we went over. And so that's the process, basically. We kept casting a broader net and until we finally got to all the public. And so we've taken care of all that. So now we can go back to the Board of Selectmen and say, yeah, we've done it. We've addressed all the stakeholders. So we'll declare this victory. And like we told them when we presented to them last time, that we're not waiting for 1.0 to execute. We've actually been executing parts of the plan for over a year now, like a year and a half at this point. So yeah, we're not standing still. And
I would emphasize, I think you should emphasize that it's a work in progress.
yeah, absolutely.
Just make sure they understand that, because
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of good stuff in there, but there's some stuff that's pretty
No, that's fine.
spicy, yeah.
No, that's fine. And the, when you look at the overall process that's described, the last one is that we'll execute and we'll adapt and we'll modify as we get results, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I had an item I wanted to bring up when I listened to that 208 piece that
Sure.
they had in Wellfleet. And I guess you're both on that. And I guess we're dealing with 3 watersheds, 3 marine watersheds, and 2 of them were dark brown, which means they were high priority. And that was the Salt Pond and the Town Cove part. And then there was Rock Harbor, and that was very light yellow. And I was told, well, that's become a low priority. He didn't explain why. But the thing that struck me is that, the various categories of remedial actions that seem to be what you were contemplating. The first one was preventive action. And it occurred to me that somehow this hasn't gotten through, certainly to the Board of Selectmen. I understand that there are people on the board that are still pushing for dredging Rock Harbor. And I would like to reemphasize again, and I've said that so many times, that it's almost a ritual, that Rock Harbor doesn't have a TMDL because of watershed loading. In other words, the part of that wetland that's upgradient of the dredge basin is good. So the MEP told us. And the part that's downgradient of the dredge is okay too. It's just that part of it that's dredged. And in fact, Dr. Howell, who was directing this whole exercise of the MEP, that was very much a top-down thing, he said, if you hadn't dredged that much, maybe you wouldn't have that problem. So keeping in mind that sewering Rock Harbor is going to cost tens of millions of dollars, I really have to wonder what these folks have in mind when they're going out there and contemplating dredging. Certainly not dredging seemed to me like to be a preventive measure, and it's not being considered. Obviously, it wasn't mentioned. And of course, you're aware of the fact that, what's that pond? Cedar Pond, is it?
Yes, just up from
Cedar
Rock.
Pond used to have a weir,
Yeah.
and it was a freshwater pond, and then somebody mucked around with it and destroyed the weir and destroyed the pond because now it's a brackish water pond. And certainly one of the preventive measures would be to replace or restore that weir in order to turn Cedar Pond into a freshwater pond, which would diminish the nitrates that's charged to Rock Harbor. So these are 2 steps in here that are preventive, but they're not on the agenda.
Well, Marcel, I'm glad you're bringing those up because they have been touched upon in those 208 discussions that I have been to.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me see if I can bring up the accurate statements. Okay. I've heard said by what I took to be an authority in the meetings is that the Cape-wide view of the Rock Harbor situation is that there are many other harbors on the Cape that are similar in topography, in hydraulics, and that the deciding as to what in fact is the kind of the regulatory category of Rock Harbor will touch on all those other harbors that are just sort of perhaps not rising up as high in priority, with people questioning their impairedness and things like that. So I think that flavors the guidance that is coming down from the Cape Cod Commission. In other words, they're sort of saying you would be smarter to have something called an Orleans Water Quality Advisory Committee that would look at the other situations in the Orleans area and just kind of hold back on Rock Harbor, because that will perhaps be a class unto itself when the decision finally comes down. And I guess their idea is that if at Cape level a decision was made as to how to categorize all of these other places as well as Rock Harbor, it can be presented up the line to the state and to EPA, saying this is how we propose to categorize it and then deal with it. That's kind of the sensing I'm getting from those conversations that are going on there.
Oh, I thought the rationale for dredging was that they didn't want the boats of the fishing fleet to be resting on their keels or capsizing.
That's what Henry Lynn said, yeah. It didn't make any sense. I thought it was.
Well, and they're going to be dredging in October.
Yeah, last
Yeah, I
vote-
know,
last
and
vote
it
was
really
about
hurts
9
me to
days.
think that they're just not thinking. I don't know who
I know it's going to kill my
was
fishing
pushing
season
this
too.
thing, but it's absolutely insane, you
The
know.
boat's still in Rock Harbor?
Well, no, I'm number 3 on the list now.
They pulled
After
out?
15 years. No, after 15 years. I don't have a slip yet, but that's where I launch, so I'll have to go to Wellfleet.
I understand that there's a big fishing boat that often is berthed there at Rock Harbor, and it's sitting on its keel at low tide. Nobody's screaming. Nobody cares. Tidal harbors are just as good as, because you understand that the wetland goes out there and there's a sort of a berm with a shallow water you can literally walk across. And those boats cannot go in and out until their draft, until that
Berm is
outside of the harbor exceeds their draft.
Yeah.
So it makes no difference whatsoever. Another thing Henry Reed said, well, if they can't, if they're afraid not to have water there, because if there's a fire, they won't be able to move the boats. And, all they need is a couple of fire hydrants, which is totally feasible. So I think what's happening at Rock Harbor is a constituency in there, and they've formed a habit, that's the way it's always been. And they just can't get their minds around it, they don't want to change. They don't know why they've got this dredge basin, but now that it's there, they want to keep it that way. It doesn't make sense.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Roger.
I was going to say, the channel at the opening is migrating to the right, and you have to go pretty far around. For my boat, it's not a problem, but for the bigger boats,
Yeah.
they...
There are a bunch
it's-
of
it's-
pine trees out there that show where
No, inside, before you get to that.
oh,
It's been migrating, and just before you get out to,
yeah,
it's very
yeah,
curved.
yeah.
So I don't know, I imagine along where the
They're
the
not
boats
allowed to
are.
dredge they can't dredge outside of the basin.
No, this is inside.
Yeah, the Conservation Commission won't allow them to do that, yeah.
Yeah. No, this is inside it. It's,
Right.
so, it's been changing a lot over the last few years.
Yeah.
It's not a problem for me.
But it's gonna take 10
But-
years
but-
for that dredge part to fill up, and
Yeah, Marcel, I think the issue has been decided for the next decade in the fact that the town did vote to come up with the money
sure, I mean, what do they know?
to join with Orleans
Yeah.
and do this purchase. And my understanding is, I haven't been following it because I got other things to do, but my understanding is they've got kind of a 3-month window now. In other words, the end of the fishing season, but before the whales show up out in the Cape Cod Bay that the spoils dump area would interfere with. So it's all going to happen in the next 90 days or so. And hopefully it'll be okay. But to skip back, you mentioned Cedar Pond. I do sit in on the Orleans Marine and Freshwater Task Force meetings, and I can tell you that this past Monday when I was there, they were saying that they do have the formal request document in to Massachusetts Department of Transportation asking for authority to change the boards on, I guess they call them the pens,
Yeah.
which to me is the outflow. And it's actually, the pens are owned by the Mass Department of Transportation because of Route 6 there. And they do have the support of Mass Wildlife and Fisheries to do that. They do have a plan of action all ready to go once they get permission to change the boards, but it's slow in coming. And if nothing else, I'm encouraged by the fact that the Orleans has spent money on getting a scientific review of the pond, and that the folks on that committee don't seem to be ready to let that one go until something a lot better happens there.
So what does Orleans say about Rock Harbor? Why do they want to dredge it?
That subject doesn't come up at that particular meeting.
Well, it's not strange, though. It's just like,
Well, no, I mean, I think the folks on that committee are focused on the health of the animals, plants and animals
Yeah.
in the water.
right.
And that's what they focus on. Now, yes, in fact, we have Rock Harbor down there, but that's not the particular subject that they are picked
So
up
what
and
have you
working
heard?
on.
Because, I mean, we sit around the table and we're saying, you know, you shouldn't dredge, and somehow the message doesn't get up to the Board of Selectmen. Why is that?
Who's saying shouldn't
Well,
dredge?
I mean, but both Board of Selectmen, with the guidance, with the advice of not dredging, decided to go ahead and dredge.
And I guess what I'm asking is, what was behind that decision?
Don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I mean, it's kind of silly. You know, I mean, you're really shooting yourself in the foot when you do that.
Well, as I say, I don't have depth on that subject, and I'm committed in on other subjects, and that's where my focus is at the moment. I can tell you what I hear in the meetings,
Yeah.
certainly, that I take as credible information, and that's basically what I've heard. I do expect some good information to flow in the next year with respect to Cedar Pond. I think we'll. All right, well, we talked about a lot of subjects, and I don't see anything more that I need to be bringing up.
I have a question. Has anyone really looked at that 200-page monster that the Cape Cod Commission put out on 208? I printed out 20 pages of the introduction, and all I saw there, it was about half history and half a lot of vacuous platitudes. So I saw nothing in the sense of a plan in the introduction.
Bill, I've read through quite a bit of it, and I agree as well. I printed a copy of it, and it cost me over $50. And it's because
Why do you print?
with my eyesight, in my reading time, I really just need to have a piece of paper in my hand. I really have a hard time reading off a screen.
Here, yeah.
And the way the texts are organized, it's 3 columns of text. It's not like, and that is in the landscape alignment of the page,
Read that.
not in the, what do they call it, the portrait alignment of the page. Bill, my take is that Paul Niedzwiecki is a trained lawyer, and if he sees that the document that he needs to get basically Cape Cod off the hook in terms of water quality is more like what we see in that document right now than something else, that's his call, because basically we got the lawsuit brought against the EPA for not enforcing the Clean Water Act, and EPA saying, okay, if you had a document that in fact updated the 208 plan, that would be considered adequate evidence up to this point to drop the suit. And of course, you'd have to carry through and do all the other things that are in there. You got a stormwater, and you got fertilizer, and you got to do septics and all that stuff. But up to that point, it buys time. It holds the lawsuit off at arm's distance. And if he's a lawyer and he says that's what he needs to hold out his hand and say, here it is, folks, to the state civil servants and to EPA, then I guess we can take his word for it. It's just my cut on it.
Yeah, it's you know, the MEP, the Massachusetts Estuary Project, that was a top-down. They had those little girls go out there in the estuary and measure things and so on, and then they came back to us and said that TSDM is this, and you're mandated to remediate that. That was top-down. There's 208, I gather, is a grassroots effort. And so by nature, it'll be a lot more stuff in it, a lot more words and, yeah.
I believe, Charles, just my summation after working with this for 2 years, I guess, is that because people are involved at a grassroots level when it comes to asking for money for implementation of some of those projects, because we feel, or I feel that I've been involved with it, I'm much more likely to vote yay rather than nay.
Absolutely, that's what it's for, yeah.
That's what it was-
Yeah,
that's
they-
strictly to
they-
get us on board
Right.
early in the process than opposed to be, here you are, you must take it or leave it, so.
Right. The town doesn't want to have orders from EPA or DEP, they want you to take the bad news.
Yeah. Bill, I'm very glad you brought up that subject, because one of the items that I have here is that we will come to a point in which a lot of the issues in the 208 plan there will be a need to communicate them to the public, to folks living here in Eastham, in order to kind of build up an informed group that says, good work has been done, we are ready to go forward to the next step. And that's going to be a hard thing to do, because this is technical stuff. Not everyone can grasp the sense of it and make a decision that it makes sense now and not later and all that kind of business. You're right. The only kind of informative thing that has now come out is that draft plan, and it runs 200 or more pages. It's got as many appendixes as it's got regulars, pages of regular text.
Well, the Barnstable Assembly of Delegates shot down his last plan, so I wonder what they think about the new one.
And his last plan was how long ago?
It was basically taking over power from the towns, and that's why the Assembly shot it down, voted against it.
Well, he's got 170 stakeholders going to meetings, and they take minutes of those meetings. So he does have paper proof that he's done outreach. But I'm beginning to sense that we will reach a point where folks like, Sandy Bain, who's been appointed to various committees, myself too, have to, in fact, spend some effort communicating with folks in the town. That's not my skill. I'm more of a science and engineering guy. I'm not so much of a word guy.
Sandy will speak to enough people for us.
Well, but yes, you can. That's coming.
That's her.
That's coming. And I'm hoping that it goes smoothly in all the other towns, because if I was a citizen living here in Eastham, I would be looking at the local newspapers and seeing how they're playing it, and seeing how emotional the discussions are in the different places, and seeing if, in fact, there is merit to that amount of emotion being displayed. So,
So this it's just a plan to make a plan, because in fact, it has no remedial actions that have actually been suggested or examined, or,
well,
it's just the process. It's all 100% process up to now, and then you guys are gonna have to do the hard work and decide which measures are appropriate for the 3 marine watersheds that we have, right?
well, yeah, look, a part of the 208 process is they've gone through and they have sort of costed out what they would call the traditional solution. And for a place like Orleans, it would be pretty heavy on a centralized sewer system. And then they've also gone forward and costed out what they call the non-traditional solutions. And that would be,
Eco toilets and oyster reefs.
aquaculture,
And eco toilets.
eco toilets, there's those.
Fertilizer control.
Fertilizer control, permeable reactive barriers. And they in fact have computers that can count up pounds of nitrogen that they would expect to get removed from either the traditional or the non-traditional. And they're also able to calculate up the cost of dollars. And they're also, they have something in there called what, triple bottom line. And essentially, so you get an environmental gain, you get a social gain, and you get a financial gain for each one of these initiatives, whatever technology is. And they would say, well, what's the social gain out of aquaculture? Well, people would get more oysters to eat. So that's kind of the way they would count that up. And they would also say that the parts per million of nitrogen or algae in the water or something is changing. That would be the environmental part of it. Yeah, they do. They are really heavily using modern day computer science technology to build their models. I mean, they do, in fact, they're going to be able to get to a point where the sooner they would press a button and they'll say, okay, the whole thing for each town, for each project, it adds up to this number. And if you want to go back down through it, you can go all the way back down to that aquaculture bed, and sure enough, you find there's an acre of aquaculture that costs so much, and
It's removing 70 pounds of nitrate.
yeah, all the way back down.
Well, let me ask you, for Salt Pond, for example, which is a fairly substantial watershed, actually, and it's all in Eastham.
What would you do?
Do you have a USGS person that's sitting with you in that?
Not at one of
to do
our
that
meetings.
watershed?
It wasn't at one of our meetings. I didn't see anybody from USGS.
You mean USGS or Seashore?
The seashore, there was some
Yeah, I'm
folks.
sorry, the seashore people. Is there one of the seashore people?
One of the seashore.
Yeah.
Are they sitting with you in
those
examining the Salt Pond?
Yes, they are.
Oh, okay. Because they're probably the biggest contributor to, to the nitrogen there.
Well,
So it'd be interesting to see what he says, or she.
she says, yeah, they're part of it. I mean, they're part of it.
Okay,
The-
that's interesting to know.
Yeah, no, to be truthful about it, they don't have a staff person there at every meeting. But have heard their folks talk, and they are informed, so they're staying up on it.
So you have to count on their goodwill to help out. Now, in terms of Rock Harbor, for example, your modeling is not gonna work because it's not the watershed loading that's causing the pollution, it's the
The shipboard
drainage
captains,
basin.
yeah.
So your modeling is not gonna work for that. They can calculate all they want about how much groundwater you're supposed to pull out. It's not relevant to the problem.
Well, the thing is that the way they are speaking of that is that they will ask for a certain amount of credit for nitrogen removed from various initiatives, various technologies. And and a civil servant at, I guess, state level or EPA level will look at the statement and say, yes, that's reasonable. I've read the literature, and you're asking for this percentage of removal, and it is reasonable to think that you might get that. So I will say, okay, I will accept that. And here's 5 pounds of nitrogen removal credit that you're going to be given for that particular thing. That's in the computer. I mean, that's
That's why I'm telling you the model's not gonna work for Rock Harbor. Because you shouldn't be asked to remove any nitrogen from the groundwater since it's not contributing
well, the
It's the MDL.
the TMDL is due strictly summer, low tide, stagnant.
well, it's you're right, but the way I'm getting it is that there is nitrate that has built up from our generation and from generations before us in the ground in the village of Orleans area, okay? And that amount of nitrate is obviously, it's going to go to down gradient, which is Cedar
It
Pond.
discharges to the wetland, yeah.
Okay, now, they're saying that if they make Cedar Pond a freshwater pond, they can give more credit for the natural attenuation that goes on in freshwater ponds. So they're saying the smart thing to do is to move Cedar Pond to a freshwater pond, and that, sunlight and wind and everything else will slowly reduce the amount of nitrate that's coming into it. And but they're also saying that up in Orleans Village is that there are many places where store owners have asked to add a second floor such that perhaps employees can live there and work downstairs. They can't do that because the ground just can't accept any more septage from those people that would be living there.
Right.
So they are, and that would be a social gain, the triple bottom line, the way they count things. And so it is in there. It's in the counting. Enough different people are in the room with different talents such that if it was kind of, not well thought out thinking, I would think someone is going to raise their hand and say, no, this
I
doesn't
wouldn't count on it
link
so
together.
far. The MEP report said we have to take 80% of the nitrates from the groundwater, and that was nonsense, of course. So, don't count on
Well, that 200-page report reminded me of a New Yorker cartoon recently. The boss is saying, "You're right, Jones, page 5 is just legalese. It's all legalese. We're a law firm."
No, we have, that's okay, as long as you're aware of the fact that removing nitrates from the groundwater at Rock Harbor is not gonna do the job, that's okay. You guys interact.
Well,
We're not gonna be
with
able
all
to
these other
fix
people.
every possible thing. We're gonna be able to get about 85 or 90% of it we're trying for anyway.
Oh, okay,
Well,
yeah, as
We
long
know there are
as.
gonna be some failed zones.
Well-
We're aware of that, but that
well-
doesn't mean we shouldn't proceed.
Oh, yeah, okay,
Well,
that's all right.
where I'm going, we have, 210,000 folks living on Cape Cod year-round.
Mm-hmm.
And if we went back 400 years, if you said there was 100 Indians living in Provincetown, 100 Indians living here, 100 Indians maybe living in Sandwich or something, 300 Indians, that is a much lower nitrate loading than what we have every year now.
Yeah.
So, to me,
Remember what Roger showed you? He showed you the nitrate levels are leveling off and may even be decreasing now.
Yeah.
well,
So, don't manufacture problems,
well, yeah, but
converged.
no,
I think the key
that
is,
many people, there has to be that nitrate rise. I mean, that's where it's coming
From
from.
400 years ago.
Yeah, and it's leveling off
It's
because
leveled
the
off.
building,
Ceased.
population
There's a
flattened
People are
out.
leaving the Cape and returning to the cities.
cause
Right.
and effect relationship between number of septics and the
Well,
amount of
but-
nitrate.
I think the key is, though, we can get brownie points for doing trivial actions which don't have much consequence, but still are within the boundary of helping.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
good summation.
But Bill, I say it this way, all my life, I've been paying taxes, and I bought sewer systems all over the United States with the taxes that I've already paid in. Now I'm saying, in retirement, can I get my fellow American citizens to help me improve the water quality where I've chose to retire, based on the fact that I was a good boy and I paid all those taxes for all those years?
Well, my consolation, Charles, is that by the time the bill gets due for sewering Rock Harbor, I'll either be dead or I'll be so old I won't care. but I can't say the same for the rest of you. You may not be so lucky.
I think I'll move to France.
All right, all right. Shall we ask if there's a motion to adjourn?
Absolutely.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, ayes have it.